Elias Finch usually loved the hush that descends on Portland just before dawn, when the Willamette looks like hammered pewter and even the bridge lights seem to be still dreaming. He parked his city Prius at the edge of the Alder Street cart pod and checked the day's itinerary on his tablet. 8 carts, routine inspections, in and out by lunchtime. He popped an antihistamine habit, not necessity, because the air smelled thick with alder pollen, and tugged his embossed badge straight. No one on the staff knew about his other medication, the bronzed vial that rested in an inner pocket like a warm coin. The label read, "In case of arcane exposure, imbibe 1 drop." Elias was the Bureau of Health's only inspector diagnosed with thymic hypersensitivity, a condition so rare that its diagnostic code ended with 3 nines, as though even the classification were a shrug. Whatever magic was made of, his body treated it like ragweed, and Portland's city charter, with its secret appendix written by a mayor who'd once dated a necromancer, required that someone like him keep an eye on the witches who ran the food carts. Most magic cooks obeyed regulations. No necromantic garnishes, no blood-based flavor amplifiers, and absolutely no edible prophecies served without a signed disclaimer. The cart owners themselves played along, a coven of hedge witches selling kombucha that glowed faintly teal, a necrobotanist who coaxed truffle spores from grave dirt but never crossed the line into reanimation, and the famed alchemist twins who could carbonate soup. Elias pretended the tingling behind his eyes was caffeine withdrawal, not alarm. As he strolled past their windows with his clipboard, at the far corner of the lot, where the asphalt lipped downward toward a storm drain, stood a cart he'd never seen on the roster. Serpion de Luna, stenciled in silver on black corrugated metal. Incense drifted from its vents, smelling of lime peel and burning mesquite. A handmade sign announced 1 item only, Taco del Eclipse, and underneath in small letters the phrase, "Eat what cannot be swallowed." No permit number, no allergen disclosure, no check marks from prior inspections. Elias felt his throat tighten. The antihistamine would do nothing against thalamic overload, and if he took a swig from the emergency vial now, the magical dampening would ruin his palate for hours, making inspection impossible. He reminded himself that the charter was clear. All carts, even the clandestine ones, must submit to evaluation. He squared his shoulders, lifted the hatch window, and was met by a sudden hush, as though the morning itself paused to eavesdrop. The witch inside was young, small, her eyes reflecting the iridescent green of hummingbird feathers. She wore an apron stitched with constellations in thread that shifted colours. "Inspector Finch," she said, pronouncing his name as if she'd practiced it. "I don't believe we've met," he replied, pretending not to notice the way her spoon stirred an empty pan, the broth swirling without liquid. "Permit." She slid a parchment across the counter. The paper was blank until he blinked, and suddenly the text unfurled like ink dropped into water. Licenciado por el Consejo de las Sombras. Signed by someone called Abuela Bruma. Elias felt a sneeze claw up his sinuses. "Arcane calligraphy, potent, not a city permit," he said. "And you're aware Portland Ordinance prohibits unregistered psychoactive comestibles." "The taco is not psychoactive," she said. "It is temporoactive." Elias frowned. "Thai magic in food form is illegal. Only if it alters causality," she answered, still stirring nothing. "Hallucinations of time are legal if marked as performance art. We have the plaque." She pointed to a brass badge riveted above the window. "City of Portland, Department of Arts and Culture. Authorized pop-up exhibition." To Elias's annoyance, it looked genuine. Still, he had cause to cite her for storage temperature. The refrigerator, half open behind her, glimmered with frost that formed shapes of crescents, as though the very chill were moonlight. He filled out a violation form, humming to keep his breath steady. Then protocol demanded, curse protocol, that he sample a tiny taste, enough to verify ingredient integrity. Usually he could dodge, claiming dietary restriction, but the smallest waver, and these maverick cooks dug in for months of appeals. Better to bite once, swallow quick, and file the report. "Very well," he said. "One sample portion." She smiled like a secret clicking open. A tortilla slid onto a comal heated by white fire. Greenish masa. No finely ground meteoric glass, judging by the prickle in Elias's nostrils. Next, she spooned in a filling of braised mushrooms that gleamed starry silver at the edges, doused with a salsa whose aroma carried cedar smoke and ocean salt. She folded the taco shut, pressed it flat, and wrapped it in waxed paper striped with phases of the moon. Elias lifted it to eye level. The tortilla shimmered. Faces flickered across its surface like silent film actors. He bit. The first flavor was simple. Corn, bright with lime, crisp as morning air. But beneath it welled another taste, darker, an afterimage on the tongue. Suddenly, he was not standing at the cart. He was 6 years old, kneeling beside his grandmother's radio, listening to her whisper stories about the ghost trains that ran under the city. Then he was 59, sitting on a bench by a swollen river no one yet called Willamette because the map lines had shifted, watching salmon glide above the floodplain sky. A swirl, a snap. Elias was back in his present body, staring at his own hands as the skin flickered caramel, then ash, then pink. He dropped the taco. The asphalt rippled outward like a pond struck by stone. Cart roofs melted into sails. Telephone wires became vines heavy with telephones like bright plastic fruit. Down at the Max station, a ripple of collective startlement rolled through commuters as every advertising poster changed. One moment, each ad showed sepia panoramas, steam-powered sky gondolas, corseted cyclists lurching along wooden boardwalks. Then they flashed to neon futurescapes of vertical gardens and solar kites. Pedestrians froze, eyes wide, each person's gaze welded to something only they could see. Elias staggered. Thalamic hypersensitivity hollowed through his nerve endings, 1,000 cat tongues. He fumbled for the emergency vial and uncorked it, but instead of swallowing a measured drop, he sneezed and inhaled half the contents. A coppery chill slammed his chest. Magic dampened, but too late. The spell had hit the city like thunder, inside a maze ricocheting. Across downtown, brewpub patrons watched their beers blossom into foam sculptures of themselves at age 70. Children on school buses blinked and saw dinosaurs pacing crosswalks wearing high-visibility vests. Traffic lights alternated between red, green, and a new color no one had a name for, but everyone understood meant remember. On Powell Boulevard, a couple embraced and glimpsed their great-great-grandchild whirling across a Martian playground. The hallucinations were lucid, collective, elastic. They mirrored possibility as readily as memory. And because Portlanders had seen weirder things, naked bike rides, Stumptown were ravens they mostly coped. Some pulled out phones to film, though cameras captured only static. Others sat on curbs, narrating visions to whoever would listen. A triage center sprung up under the Burnside Bridge, where volunteer medics offered blankets, coffee, and gentle reminders that time was probably still linear. Elias, however, could barely breathe. The dampening liquid muted the spell's claws, but did nothing for guilt. He had tasted what was forbidden, and now the whole city rode his reaction like a surfer on an accidental wave. He forced himself upright and faced the witch. "Fix this," he rasped. She looked at him with something oddly like sympathy. "It is not broken. Portland is only remembering itself forward and backward." People could walk into traffic. They might also walk into acceptance, she answered. It was not a slogan. It sounded like grief. She sighed. "But if you insist." She locked the service window and emerged from the cart's side door. The moment her shoes touched pavement, a faint hush rippled across the lot. Even the illusions seemed to lean nearer. She reached beneath her apron and withdrew a mortar carved from obsidian and shaped like a crescent moon, then plucked packets from the air as if they'd been hanging invisible, packets labelled dawn dust, dusk salt, and the cramped word meanwhile. She looked up at Elias. Such cures require an anchor, a person tied to the spell's genesis. That is you. Elias swallowed. His allergy usually kept him from deeper involvement in magic. Now he was already waist deep. Tell me what to do, he said. Hold out your hand. She poured a pinch of dawn dust, golden as powdered sunrise, onto his palm. It tingled like seltzer. Remember your first memory. Elias saw himself again at the radio, smelled lemon polish, heard his grandmother humming a tune nobody else knew. Those details wrapped around the dust. It glowed. Other hand, dusk salt, dark violet. Chilly. Foresee your last memory. His mind flashed to a distant shore, some hospice of clouds where he lay older, bones humming with wind, smelling rain on cedar. The salt absorbed the scene, sparkling midnight blue. Now, the witch said, emptying meanwhile into the mortar. Breathe on this. He leaned in. The granules shimmered between dawn and dusk, each flickering microsecond of interim life. The witch ground the mixture. Every stroke of pestle drew lights from hiding. Street lamps, phone screens, car headlights flickered in sympathetic rhythm, half here, half else when. She produced a tortilla, this one dull beige, ordinary. She spooned a smear of the mixture inside, folded it and pressed his hands around it. You must eat, she said, and believe the taste is present tense. Elias barked a laugh. My belief didn't count a minute ago. She cocked her head. You believed something else then, that the future was safely fenced away, believed differently. Sirens wailed distantly, bending through chords never played before. Overhead, the sky alternated between sunrise pink and deep space black, stars showing at noon. Elias thought of his father's wristwatch, a battered analog piece that kept awful time but perfect rhythm, ticking without fail. He closed his eyes and bit. The tortilla tasted of plain bread. Nothing more. Chew, swallow, another bite. Bland, comforting, present. With each chew he recited silently, Now, now, now! The flavors obeyed. He finished the taco, and the mortar dust crumbled to grey. Sound rushed back like floodwater breaking a dam. Tram bells, bike gears, car horns, conversation. The sky steadied into its usual unhurried drizzle. On the sidewalks, people blinked, looked around and resumed walking, as though none of it had been outside an ordinary daydream. A man laughed at a joke he hadn't yet heard. A woman wiped tears from seeing her future self, but couldn't recall why she was crying. Camas blossoms drifting on the wind, which had been neon a moment ago, were white again. Elias bent double, hands on knees, breathing the damp air. His allergy prickled but didn't flare. The witch watched him. What's your name? He asked between breaths. Luz, she answered. He took out his notepad. Luz of Serpiente Luna, citation 4. She raised an eyebrow and he stopped. Because how do you write up an infraction for opening temporal empathy? The city code didn't cover it. He shut the pad. This cart, he said slowly, needs a licensed refrigerator, proper hand-washing station, and yes, an actual city health permit. She nodded. We will comply. But, he added, the Taco del Eclipse retire at Portland's not ready. Perhaps, she said, or perhaps you weren't. Then, softer, but now maybe you are. Elias rubbed his temples. A headache bloomed behind his eyes, part hangover, part awe. Look, Luz, why today? Why me? Because, she said, prophecy tastes best when shared before it spoils and your city nears a turning. Fear of tomorrow calcifies policy, makes the civic heart rigid. The eclipse is soon. Folks must see past and future at once to realize the present is choice, not chain. You, allergic to magic, are oddly immune to denial. Your panic woke the others. He managed a rueful smile. You gave Portland a prophetic burrito because you think we have civic commitment issues. You'd be surprised how effective snacks are for enlightenment. She tilted her head. Still, I'm sorry for the turmoil. Elias waved her apology away. Across the lot, a group of programmers compared notes about seeing punch-card computers floating above quantum chips. Closer, a bassist scrawled a melody he'd heard from a century ahead. The city buzzed, like a hive after the Queen's return, disoriented, energized. Maybe, Elias said, the Health Bureau can authorize limited exhibitions, consent forms, trained monitors, controlled servings. Luz's eyes brightened. You'll propose that? I'll try. Bureaucracy is slower than necrotic yeast, but I'll try. He expected her to vanish in a puff of sage smoke. Instead, she stuck out her hand. He shook it. Her palm was warm, human, calloused from tongs and knives. Be well, Elias Finch, she said, and keep antihistamines handy. She ducked back into the cart. The hatch lowered, the incense extinguished. When he glanced away, scribbling provisional notes about proposed guidelines for temporactive edibles, and looked up again, the cart was still there. Only its color had shifted to somber slate, the name replaced with "Coming Soon" in simple vinyl letters. A few passers-by slowed, reading curiosity in their brows, but moved on. Elias exhaled, feeling the city settled as if mountains had sighed. He walked block after block, verifying that reality leaned stable. No more phone vines, no trilobites in puddles, just wet streets, coffee steam, and the smell of yeast from somebody's bagel bakery. But the spell had left residue. Elias sensed it like music remembered in silence. In the Pearl District, a cyclist waited at a red light with tears of joy drying on her cheeks, and Hawthorne, a street poet, sold chapbooks titled Instructions for My Granddaughter's Internal Mars Colony. These were echoes, not hallucinations, Met's people carried back from the between time. He reached the riverfront just as the sun inched above clouds. Ducks stitched zigzags across the water. Elias thought of his first memory, his last, the gulf of now, bridging them. His heartbeat sounded sturdy, like a hammer forging seconds, and for once he didn't sneeze.